begin by noting that this is the first indoor meeting since the beginning of the pandemic, and that is something to rejoice in, I think, that we're able to do that. And I also want to, I guess, why don't I start by asking all registered voters to raise their hands. And those who are not registered voters, please note that you will need permission to speak if you have anything you need to say. So it's good to know how many are here at this point. And I know we're expecting at least several more folks to come. Is there a tech person present? Is there a tech person present? No. Okay.
Cannot understand over the microphone and laughter.
Okay, I was asking whether there's a tech person present, which might make it easier to understand. We're having a little problem with some of these remote microphones. So if anyone has any ideas about how to help with that, that'd be great. Okay, I want to welcome several of our representatives here and invite them to say a few words. I'm not sure who's here. Michelle, you're here, and
Senator Wendy Harrison.
And Wendy Harrison is here. So great. Michelle, do you want to start? Great.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be in an indoor Westminster town meeting. It's been a while since we were together in the room. The last time we were together in this room, I wasn't your representative. But I'm starting my third year as a representative, representing Westminster. We've now been redistricted, so I'm also representing Rockingham and Brookline. And the first thing I'd like to say is I was requested to pass on regrets from Leslie Goldman, who is the other representative for our district. She was snowed in and the road hadn't been plowed, so she was planning to come today but was unable to make it. I wanted to just give you a couple of highlights about things that are happening in the House of Representatives. We do have a town meeting report in the back of the room, which you're welcome to grab if you would like to see some sample legislation that the committees have been working on. But I wanted to say, just in general, in the House, we've done an awful lot of work in our committees on a variety of different topics, and most of them are still in process. We actually have not passed much legislation yet, so I'm hesitant to say too much about what we're doing because a lot of that is likely to change. Particularly it will change after we send it to the Senate, and they have different opinions about some of the work that we've been working on. But some of the priorities that we have in the House, I believe, are also priorities in the Senate. We're working very hard on the idea of establishing a paid family leave program, which some other states in the United States have, but we haven't been able to implement it here in Vermont. And that is something that it looks like we're going to be able to move forward. We've been working really hard on workforce and housing issues, which I think are the two single biggest issues that are impacting the way of life in Vermont here. We have many, many employers in almost every sector who are not able to find employees to do the work that they need to run their businesses. And then sometimes they find people that they want to bring in to do that work, and those people can't find housing. So we're putting a lot of investment into a whole range of different options in terms of housing, both affordable housing, first-time home buyers, missing middle, whole range of different housing options, all of which I think are really important because if we don't have accessible and affordable housing and we don't have people able to come and fill the jobs that we have here in Vermont, that's going to be really hard. So those are things that we have in process. We're not finished with them, but if you have more questions, I'm happy to give you more information about that one-on-one. I would like to say also that I have had a number of times people come to me and ask questions about a particular issue. So they'll write me a letter, they give me a phone call, sometimes send me a text, and they say, hey, what's happening with the bill about trapping beavers? And there's a process that's not that complicated where you can learn about those without checking with me directly. I don't mind if you check with me, But as a social studies teacher before I came into office, one of the things that I did in the summer was I taught high school students about the legislative process. So I developed a workshop for the Governor's Institute called Making Laws, Making Change. And I taught people both how to maneuver the website. So if you're interested in an issue like beaver trapping, how do you find that bill and find out what the status is and who is the person you want to contact if you have an opinion about that. So I would love to teach people in my community how to do that because people ask me about it, but I never have time to do the whole process one-on-one. So I actually have a flyer in the back. If you're interested in learning more about the legislative process, I'm going to offer 2 different workshops on Zoom just to help educate you about the process. And it's not partisan, it's not with an agenda, it's just to help you be a more educated population. And if you want to advocate, it'll make it easier for you to do that. So those are going to be in March and April, and people are welcome to join me on Zoom for those. Also, one other thing that I wanted to mention, if you're not aware of the legislators in the library, the 2 senators and your 2 representatives have been meeting monthly. The 3rd Saturday of each month, we meet at 10:30 a.m. at the Rockingham Library. And that's basically just an opportunity for you to share your concerns and then hear some updates about the kind of things that we're working on. And sometimes we can do a little bit of follow-up one-on-one with folks about specific concerns as well. So do keep in mind, as a representative, or in Wendy's case, as a senator, she'll be coming up next, one of our roles is to do constituent services. So if you have a problem with a state entity that isn't getting through, with the issues that you're concerned about, you can ask me and I can help with that. If you're having an issue with your unemployment not coming through, or your driver's license, or something dealing with a state agency, part of my job is to help you figure out who is the person who could actually address your issue and nudge them so that you get follow-up. So please don't hesitate to be in touch. If you would like to hear from me more regularly, I do send out a monthly update with some information both about legislation and events in the community. I'd be happy to add anyone who wants to be on that list to that list. But in the meantime, I think that's enough from me. And I would like to invite my new colleague, Wendy Harrison, who is one of our new state senators, up to give a little introduction herself as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody. The course that you're going to do is wonderful, and I urge everyone to take advantage of that. That's terrific. So I'm Wendy Harrison. I'm new to the Senate. I'm not new to government. That's what I've been doing all of my life, mostly. The Senate is a very new place for me. I've been there 2 months now. I'm starting to get the hang of it. I'm on 2 committees. I'm on the Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs Committee and the Institutions Committee. And in the Economic Development and Housing Committee, we've been working on housing because we know that that's a huge issue in Vermont. And what we did, we took a lot of testimony initially from builders, from employers. I mean, there were folks hiring at all levels of organizations. We heard from hospitals who had hired folks who weren't able to take the jobs, both nurses, people at high levels of management, who weren't able to take the jobs because they couldn't find housing. So housing is critical all over the state, and there's a lot of components to it. Builders are having issues. They point to Act 250. Act 250 is complicated because Act 250 is a process, as many of you know, and the intent of Act 250 was to protect the environment while allowing development in certain areas, in areas that are already developed, so that we maintain the character of Vermont, where we have, sorry, I keep touching this, I'll stand back, where we have hamlets, basically, and centers of development with farms and open space in between. That's what makes it a great place to live and a great place to visit. So Act 250 is credited with keeping that structure, which I agree with. Now, in certain cases, Act 250 can be a real barrier for folks. So what our committee did was look at the specific barriers, and so we made some changes, some suggested changes in the legislation that we passed out that we think will be very helpful in keeping the character of Vermont, but allowing more development, specifically housing. One of the things that we did, which will, if it passes, and it has a process to go through that I'll get to in a second, will mandate that all towns, wherever a single-family house is allowed, a duplex is allowed. So that's something I just want you to be aware of, because you may have opinions on that, and you have plenty of time to express your opinions. But that'll double, in theory, the amount of housing that we can have. And so that would allow, for example, if you have a big house, you could create an apartment in your house. Right now you can do ADUs, if you've heard of those, accessory dwelling units, those are allowed. So there's a lot to this bill, and I would be happy to talk to folks about it. We did pass that out of our committee last week, and we were really happy about that because we think it could be a very transformational bill. So that's now in the Natural Resources Committee, which will take a real hard look from an Act 250 perspective, and then it'll come to the Senate floor, and then it'll go over to the House, and we'll see what happens there. So hopefully we'll have good news on housing by the end of the legislative session, which is only another 2 months. On the Institutions Committee, that committee works on the capital bill, which is all buildings in the state. We work with the state library, all of the water and sewer permit, or not permits rather, the water and sewer grants, barn grants, if you're familiar with those, historic preservation grants, those all go through that committee. So we actually have a fair amount of additional funding this year because of the federal funding. So it actually makes it more complicated sometimes to have more money than less money because we need to figure out what to do with it. So you've probably heard of the Clean Heat Standard, S5. I've gotten hundreds of emails and messages on that. And I'm sorry I can't respond to everyone during this session. I'm going to take time this week to get back to folks. But a huge concern of people on the Clean Heat Standard was that it's going to increase oil prices. There's a number, 70 cents a gallon, that's out there. We changed the bill since that first came out and put in a check back so that in 2 years, once the plan is completely fleshed out, because it's a pretty complicated plan, the legislature will have to vote again to adopt it. And obviously the public has an opportunity to express their opinions at that point. And in 2 years, we'll know much more what was going to happen. Now, for the folks who are in favor, and I am in favor of S5, voted for it. It was a big part of my campaign. I heard from people that we really want not just to protect the climate, which obviously is critical, but Vermont is a small state, but to protect our residents because the price of fuel oil is very volatile. So what's important about S5 is that it protects real people from very high prices. And it doesn't mandate that anyone switch. You can keep oil. That's a message that I don't think we conveyed as well as we could have. You don't have to get rid of your oil furnace. We're trying to find ways for lower income, moderate income folks to be able to winterize their homes, to be able to add other sources of heat so that you can have multiple sources of heat. So you keep the oil for the super cold days. You have air source heat pumps, you have there's clean wood heat. We didn't talk enough about that either. It's not that everyone has to do air source heat pumps. There's clean wood, which is part of the program too. So we have time, what I wanted to say, if you're in favor of it, we're still on track because the process always included this 2-year design of the system, because again, it's a very complicated system. So we're not slowing down. I just want to assure people who want us to stay on this path that we're not slowing down. We just added a check-in in 2 years. So those are the main things I wanted to let you know about. I'm really looking forward to learning more about what's happening in the town, in Westminster, because you guys have a lot going on. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Wendy and Michelle. We're lucky to have you. Okay. I think we'll begin with something fun. Is Craig Allen here? No. Craig, do you want to come forward? Yeah, I think so.
I went to school here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Obviously, I'm a select person who is no longer going to be a select person. And I've served for many years, and it's been a privilege to really get to know the town much better. Being raised in North Westminster, I didn't have a clue who anybody was in Westminster West. But I've come to really appreciate how they have such a bond and how much they want to volunteer and help out. And one of the things that we've done probably poorly as a select board, we haven't tried to get more people involved with committees and get more people involved with what's going on in town. Because it shouldn't be just the select board making all the decisions. We've had a lot of decisions to make that were hard this year. And but every year, and I get the privilege of being the last year doing this, we get to choose volunteers of the year. These are somebody who's being recognized for volunteering and doing a lot for the town. And every year we get nominations for it. And this idea actually was started years ago by Bev Majors. I remember she was the first one to recommend it, and I thought it was a great idea. And so there's a plaque down there for the last, I think it goes back to 2003, because that's the year I got on, I think. But this has been, I really enjoyed as a select person, and the one easy thing that I enjoyed doing at the end of the year was going through the list. This year, we had to sit down and do it, and we had a list, and we had 2 names given to us by Pauline and Patty in the office. And it was the minute we saw the 2 names, we said, this is the easiest decision we made this year. It really was on it. And I would like to say that this year, I don't even think, they volunteer so much that I don't even think I have to say their last name. If I said Peggy and John, could you please come up with that? They get a plaque. There's also a nice plaque down at the town hall with their name on it. They get a nice clock, and here, I want to thank you all for everything. They gave me a list of everything they've done for volunteer, and we don't have enough time tonight to sit here and read everything that Peggy and John has done for this town, but I really, really enjoyed getting to know them, and I really want to thank them very much for all the things they've done on this list. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and congratulations, Peggy and John. Okay. You can't hear. Oh, Dad can't hear. Anyone else having trouble hearing? I'll speak as loud as I can, and I don't have too much confidence in the sound system. Try to make it work. Okay. Sure. Yeah, that'll help a bit. Okay, thank you. Great. Okay, we are now going to move into the substance of the meeting. We're going to start with an invocation, which is an adaptation of something that a town moderator, I think, in Corinth started many years ago, and Fletcher has adapted and picked up, and I think it's a wonderful little invocation. So let us start with that. Let us pause for a moment of silence and reflection. We are gathered together in civil assembly. We gather as a community in the oldest sense of the word. We gather to come together and try to make decisions about what is right, about what is wrong. Let us advocate for our positions, but not at the expense of others. Let us remember there is an immense gap between saying, I am right, and saying, I believe I am right. And that our neighbors with whom we disagree are good people with hopes and dreams as true and as high as ours. And let us also remember that in the end, caring for each other in this community is of far greater importance than any difference we may have. Thank you. Now, we will go review a very brief summary of Robert's Rules of Order, because that is what we will be using to run this meeting, and all of us, including me, can use a little reminder of how they go. I should add that if there is a question, I've asked Ian Proctor to be parliamentarian. Thank you, Ian, for volunteering to do that. Okay. This is a quick little summary. Robert's Rules is the basic rules of order for this meeting, except where Vermont law takes precedence. An article must be moved and seconded by the body and restated by the moderator before it is under consideration. And I'm going to add that when you're moving an article and when you're seconding an article, could you please state your name? We had to do a little archaeological digging to remember a couple of seconds from last year. So if you could please do that, that would be helpful especially for the clerk taking the minutes. Articles may have only one associated amendment at a time, and amendments may have only one amendment. So you can sort of go only 2 levels deep. After you've spoken once on a particular article, you will not be recognized a second time during discussion on that article or amendment until all other voters who wish to speak on the issue are given an opportunity to do so. Division of the House can be requested by one voter before or after a voice vote. State law provides for a paper ballot vote on the request of 7 voters. Debate may be cut off by a motion to call the question, a second, and a 2/3 vote to do so. All motions, remarks, and discussion must be addressed to the moderator. I will do my best to recognize you in the order that you have raised your hands. You must be recognized to speak, even to call the question. State law prohibits consideration of articles that have not been warned. This means you cannot take binding action under the article Other Business. Reconsideration of an article is allowed by state law until a point is reached where another article is under consideration. My role as moderator is to help you accomplish the business you intend to do. Please raise your hand and ask questions if you don't understand what is happening. And that is that. Okay. We'll move on to the articles. And at this point, I think we'll start with the school district. So why doesn't the school district board come up, please, and representatives. Okay, Andy has helped figure out the roving microphone issue, so I'm going to ask for a volunteer who might be willing to run this microphone around to anyone who would, any of the voters who would like to speak, who raise their hands or recognize and would like to speak. Do we have any volunteers as a runner? You would? Great, terrific. Okay, Article 1, well, I'm going to read right from the beginning of the warning here. The legal voters of the Westminster School District, Town Fire District Number 3 in town are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Bellows Falls Union High School Auditorium in Bellows Falls, Vermont, Westminster, Vermont, I should say, on Saturday, March 4, 2023 at 10 o'clock in the morning, to take action on the articles following Article 1. The meeting will be recessed to the Westminster Fire Station, Grant Avenue, Westminster, Vermont, to meet at 10 o'clock in the forenoon on Tuesday, March 7, 2023, for consideration of Article 1 by Australian ballot. The polls shall remain open until 7 o'clock in the evening, at which time the meeting will recess to meet at the Bellows Falls Union High School Auditorium at 8 in the evening, same day, Tuesday, March 7, 2023, to consider any remaining articles if necessary. So Article 1 is to choose all town school district officers, town fire district number 3 officers, and town officers by Australian ballot, Tuesday, March 7, 2023, from 10 o'clock in the forenoon, 10 a.m., until 7 o'clock in the evening, 7 p.m. So please remember to vote on Tuesday and remind all your friends and relatives to do the same. Article 2, to hear reports of the town school district and take action thereupon. And I believe we'll start with a report by the chair of the school board, Cheryl Charles.
Thank you. Well, it's great to see everybody here in person and indoors again. Thank you all for making the effort to come out on this snowy day. Are you okay hearing me? Okay, great. I'd like to start by asking everyone here, the members of the school board, to introduce themselves. I'm Cheryl Charles, chair of the board, and let's begin actually with our superintendent of schools.
I'll use my teacher voice. I'm Andy Haas, superintendent of schools.
I'm Margie Kearns-Ferry. I'm a Westminster board member.
I'm Karen Blanchard, and I'm also a Westminster board member.
I'm Charlie Hutchison. I'm the vice chair of the Westminster School Board.
I'm Team BLC, Westminster School Board member.
Great, thank you. So a brief report, and then we'll go to the articles. The first thing I'd like to ask you to do is to be sure to read the letter from the principal, Liz Hardy. She couldn't be here today, but there is a letter in the town meeting book from her. There is also a letter from this town school board that is informative, and I'd love to have you read that. Further, we provided a document that is a handout. Many of you have already. If you didn't get it, please do so. There are copies in the back. And it's really a frequently asked questions document, especially about the budget and the proposed articles that we're working on today. I think I'd start with, as we do in our letter, that this was so exciting to actually have the school open again for in-person instruction, where family members and community members could actually come to the school this year. So there has been throughout this school year, after a very challenging 2 years with the impact of COVID, a warmth, a sense of calm, a lot of joy, a lot of laughter. At the same time, there are a great many challenges still facing the children and youth of our community and their families. And that becomes evident in just difficulties that many of the children are having in regulating themselves, self-control, being able to focus, being able to sit still in school. So lots of good things happening, and let me just say there are a great many challenges as well. And so we've had the benefit of some federal monies to help us through the Elementary and Secondary Recovery Act that have allowed us to bring in additional resources to help with things like supporting the children and their teachers to maintain calm. It was just a great many strategies to reinforce both the social and emotional learning going on, which in turn then contributes to their academic achievement and their sense of well-being overall. So a great start to the school year, a good school year, and a great many challenges. When it comes to the budget itself, you'll see that there's an 11.5% increase from a $4.6 million budget to a 5.1. However, and when we get to the articles, are proposing that we use some of a significant surplus that has become available to us to reduce the actual cost of the budget to start this year, to reduce it by $300,000. So you'll see that, and we'll get into more detail about that. A question that you'll ask is, what's the source of the surplus? When Westminster was forcibly merged with Athens and Grafton, we're always quick to say, good friends in Athens and Grafton, but it never made any sense to have us be a school district when we're not even contiguous. At any rate, in those years that the 3 years that we were merged with Athens and Grafton, in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22, we ended up with about a $1.6 million surplus. What were the sources of that? Some miscalculations in the number of students for whom we'd be paying 7th and 8th grade tuitions. And secondly, a set of errors in the business office that overestimated the cost of health insurance for our employees. I think you've probably read in the Reformer and in other places there have been challenges in the business office for several years. That's now really resolved. We have an outstanding and highly experienced business manager, director of finance, Jim Vizina, who sent a message to us this morning to say he's buried in snow a little farther north of us, but would be available by phone if we needed to ask him a question. At any rate, the business office is stabilized. We have experienced people there, and that is turned around in a very, very positive way. So then what are the increases in the budget that we'll talk about in more detail? The state has agreed to and asked us to, therefore we have no choice, a 12.7% increase in health insurance benefits for our employees. We have an increase actually in the rate at which tuitions are being paid. In fiscal year 21, actually, let me go back to, not the year that we're in right now, but last year, the students in our community that went to the Bellows Falls Middle School, we were invoiced by Rockingham, initially at the rate of $16,000 per student, and then at the rate of $17,000 per student. This year, based on real costs for Rockingham and the education of the students at the middle school, we're being invoiced for $21,000 per student. That's a significant increase. That's hitting our current budget. And what we have done then, because we were not prepared for that during the current fiscal year, we're proposing to create a reserve fund going forward, and that's 60% of the overall increase in the budget that we're bringing to you here today. So those are just some highlights. I think one of the things I want to say about Wendy Harrison's comment about maybe some improvements in providing housing for people here. We always get the question about how stable is the student population. It's actually holding pretty steady, but one of the interesting things you'll see in that frequently asked question document is that our younger students, the pre-kindergarten through kindergarten, first, second grade, right through there, it's really the very youngest of the kids. We've seen an increase in the last 4 years. I can see some young parents in this meeting today. We're delighted that you're here. So we're actually seeing an increase in the youngers coming to the school, but we don't have housing for all the people that need and want to come to this community. So keep that in mind. And with that, we'll just go right into the articles, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And I should note for the school board members, those two microphones should work. If you have something to say. Okay, so we will move on to Article 3, which reads, shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District authorize and instruct its school directors and treasurer to borrow money if necessary on the credit of the town school district for its current expenses in anticipation of the collection of taxes and receipt of money due from state aid and other sources. What is your pleasure? You don't have to read it. You could just say, I so move, if you prefer.
I so move.
Okay, Tina, and again, please say your name.
Team BLC, I so move, Article 3.
Thank you, team. Article 3 has been moved, and is there a second? Seconded by Susan Harlow. So Article 3, shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District authorize and instruct its school directors and treasurer to borrow money if necessary on the credit of the town school district for its current expenses in anticipation of the collection of taxes and receipt of money due from state aid and other sources. Any questions? Any explanation necessary? I see none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. Okay, moving on to Article 4. Shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District apply the sum of $300,000 from the fiscal year 2021 fund balance of $1,062,546 to reduce expenditures in the fiscal year 2024? What is your pleasure?
I would like to move the adoption of that article. This is Cheryl Charles.
Cheryl Charles has moved Article 5. Article 4. Shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District apply the sum of $300,000 from the fiscal year 2021 fund balance of $1,062,546 to reduce expenditures in the fiscal year 2024? Is there a second? Seconded. Okay, great. Did you get that name, Pauline?
I did not.
Lynn Twiss. Great. We're being very careful to write these names down because it's important to get them. Okay. What is your pleasure? Cheryl, do you have anything to add? Any explanation necessary?
I think I did. All the explanation, so is there questions?
Any questions? I see none. So we'll move on to the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. Article 5. Shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District apply the sum of $150,000 from the anticipated fiscal year 2022 fund balance of $608,575 to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in the fiscal year 2025?
Charlie Hutchison, I so move.
Okay, Charlie Hutchinson has moved Article 5. Shall the voters of the the Westminster Town School District apply the sum of $150,000 from the anticipated fiscal year 2022 fund balance of $608,575 to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in the fiscal year 2025? Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, please say your name.
Ronald Boslin.
Ron Boslin. Thank you, Ron. Okay. Yes. Sarah has a question.
I see in the report that the figure, at least printed here, is 608,375, 575. Is that?
Yes.
Is that
Yes, it is. Well, Cheryl, do you want to answer that?
You did say 575, but it is 375. Right, you said it 575, it is 375.
Oh, I misread it, I think is what we're saying. Okay, yes, it is 375. Yeah. So I will read it again just to try to clarify. Article 5, shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District apply the sum of $150,000 from the anticipated fiscal year 2022 fund balance of $608,375 to create a reserve fund to offset expenditures in the fiscal year 2025? I should probably wear my glasses.
Do I need to read the book?
No, I think we're all set. Okay, any explanation, Charlie or Cheryl?
Just one quick comment. When this was written, the audit had not been completed, so that figure is now a certainty. It's not an anticipated surplus. We can count on that surplus.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Any questions? Seeing none, I will ask for a vote. Ian, should I be rereading this motion right now in asking for a vote? We haven't changed anything. Not necessarily. Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. Article 6. Shall the voters apply the sum of $100,000 from fiscal year 2021 fund balance and an additional $100,000 from the anticipated fiscal year 2022 fund balance to a dedicated reserve fund to be used for charges incurred when paying tuitions for 7th and 8th graders not budgeted? What is your pleasure?
I'm leaning over here. I vote that yes.
Oh.
I move yes.
Okay. Karen Blanchard has moved the Article 6. Shall the voters apply the sum of $100,000 from fiscal year 2021 fund balance and an additional $100,000 from the anticipated fiscal year 2022 fund balance to a dedicated reserve fund to be used for charges incurred when paying tuitions for 7th and 8th graders not budgeted. Is there a second? And your name? Oliver Brody. Thank you, Oliver. Okay. Does the school board want to offer any explanation to this? No. Okay. Great. Any questions from the voters? Seeing none, all those in favor, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. Article 7. Shall the voters apply the sum of $520,000 from the 2021 fund balance and $250,000 from the 2022 fund balance to create a reserve fund for repairs or improvements to buildings, including, although not limited to, enhanced security and energy efficiencies, and to authorize the board to expend such funds. What is your pleasure?
I am Margie Kearnsberry, and I'm so moved.
Thank you, Margie. Margie has moved Article 7. Shall the voters apply the sum of $520,000 from the 2021 fund balance and $250,000 from the 2022 fund balance to create a reserve fund for repairs or improvements to buildings, including, although not limited to, enhanced security and energy efficiencies, and to authorize the board to expend such funds? Is there a second? Yes. Michelle, state your name.
Michelle Bosley.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay. Is there any explanation from the board? None offered, unless there are any questions. Yes. I will go with
Robert Wickberg.
Robert Wickberg, Bob Wickberg.
$770,000 is a lot.
Wait, Robert.
And I'm trying to add up.
Bob, you're getting the microphone coming your direction.
Okay.
I always thought I was loud enough, but okay. $770,000 is a lot of money. Do you guys have a capital plan? In other words, do you know what you're going to do with this money? Do you know what improvements you need to make over the coming years, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the board, thank you, Bob. The board has been queried.
So it's got to just be behind the other microphones. You may want to step out.
Okay.
Otherwise, it only feeds back because it moves behind the moderator's microphone.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for that little tip. So.
Hello. Okay. So we do have some specificity in that we are looking at doing a couple of security enhancements at the school buildings, making a little entryway so that you're coming in through a double door instead of entering right into the building. The biggest expense that we're looking at is we're looking at doing some kind of a solar array on the building, which would be in the ballpark of $400,000. We've looked at a few, different things, wind power as well. We'd like to offset our expenditures of energy bills in the future. So we're looking at this as an investment in our energy efficiency into the future. So that's the biggest one. Yeah.
How big is the electric bill right now?
It's about $37,000 per year. But you can find it it's all laid out. I don't know exactly which page in mine, but it's about $37,000 per year. Am I right there? At the one building, and then at the other building, $1,500.
So it would be about a 7.5-year payoff.
Yeah, it takes about 7.5 or 8 years to pay off, or to make back what we would expend. But we have the money now to do it. We do not have to borrow this money. This is a budgetary surplus. We can use it right now and invest it in offsetting these costs for the foreseeable future. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, why don't I go over here? Let's see, where is the microphone?
I'm here, but I don't see the hands. I'm going here.
No, over here.
Here, okay.
June Streeter, I was wondering if you knew where you were going to put these solar panels and if there's been an in-depth investigation into the health benefits to the children.
Thank you, June. Anyone on the board care to reply?
Hi, Charlie Hutchison again. We are in the initial stages of investigating exactly, can you hear me? Initial stages of investigating exactly how and where the solar panels would be placed. There's two options. One is on the roof, and the other option is in the ample space behind the school, at the Westminster Central School campus. To the best of my knowledge, there are no health issues associated with solar panels for children, but they would be separated so children would not have direct access to them at all. And so far as the payback issue again, energy costs will rise over the foreseeable future, but at current prices, we anticipate that we would get our investment back within 7 or 8 years, and then have another 30 or 40 years of free electricity, short of maintenance and so on, for the schools, for both campuses. Does that answer the question, ma'am?
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Any other questions? Yes. Outback Molly, please state your name.
Molly. We did a lot of looking into this several times at the high school. One of the questions I've asked several times and nobody can answer it is what happens when they don't work anymore and how do you recycle them and are they recyclable? And the gentleman that wanted to bring them into high school never came back after I asked him that question. So I think that's important to think about our future and our future kids and what you're actually going to do with these things after they stop working. I did quite a bit of homework myself on them, and I was not finding anything that was telling me they were going to last more than 20 years. So I think it's something you really need to think about. The other thing I heard was we were talking about taking playground area and put a solar array. This is a small town, beautiful little street we drive down. Is that really what we want to look at? I just want you guys to think about it because there's way more to it than just sticking some solar panels on some ground.
Thank you, Molly. Any other questions? Yes.
I guess I should ask, are we allowed to question what's been stated, or are we just only allowed to speak to the board about this article at this moment?
Yeah, here comes the...
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I think for me, the biggest question is, okay, for me, it's like when we're talking about our children and the well-being of our children is, can we make a conscious choice to preserve the well-being of the earth for our children? I think that's a much bigger question than what are we going to do with these solar panels when they've outlived their lifespan. And also, I mean, there's really no health risks for children with regards to solar panels. The health risks come with this like mindless consumption of fossil fuels that we've been doing. So I don't know if this is the right time to say that, but that's my question.
Okay, thank you. And please state your name.
Sorry, my name's Sarah.
Sarah Carlisle.
Sarah Carlisle. Great. Any other questions? Mr. Bosley.
Yes, my name's Ron Bosley. Rossland. We recently got solar panels and they were guaranteed, I think, for 30, not 40 years. So that was a local vendor.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, right over here, Martha. Please state your name, Martha.
Hi, I'm Martha Mitchell. I have lived off the grid in a house that relies solely on solar electricity since 1984. We have no backup. We use nothing but solar power. Our initial panels, which were put up in 1984, are still working at about 85 to 90% of their original abilities. The newer panels that we've put up are so much more efficient than the original ones. Hydroelectric plants have a lifespan. Wind power has a lifespan. Nuclear power plants have a lifespan. Trees have a lifespan. Every source of energy you look at has a lifespan. I can tell you, having raised my two children who are now in their 30s, who lived completely off the grid, that they're much more aware of their power use than their peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Any other questions? Bob, we'll go back to you. I know you've had your hand up.
Oh, may I make one more comment? Our annual electric bill is $2 for distilled water. And every 11 years, we replace the batteries at about $1,000.
Thank you, Martha. Bob.
There's nothing in this bill or in this article at all that compels the board to spend this money on anything in particular other than capital improvements. Today we could be talking about solar, and I really didn't intend to open a debate on solar power because there's nothing in the article that says anything about solar power. But there's nothing here that explicitly says that's what they're going to do with it. So I move that we remove the last clause of the article, which says, and to authorize the board to expend such funds. That way the board has to come back to us once they have a definite plan and tell us what the plan is, get approval for it, and we can all have a nice debate about solar power at that time and not at this time. So that's my motion.
Okay, Bob Wickberg has made an amendment to eliminate the last line of this Article 7. So it would then read, shall the voters apply the sum of $520,000 from the 2021 fund balance and $250,000 from the 2022 fund balance to create a reserve fund for repairs or improvements to buildings, including, although not limited to, enhanced security and energy efficiencies, period. Is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second it, Katie Dearborn.
Katie Dearborn has seconded that amendment. Okay. We have, the board would like to respond.
I think there's, the only problem with having to come back to the voters for it is that we do know that it will save the school money in the long term in terms of energy efficiencies.
If you do that.
Yeah, can I finish? We do 100% need the security enhancements because the school is not safe to enter given the climate of our country and the ways and the security risks around schools. That's one thing. The second is we have the advantage right now of the Inflation Reduction Act, which really gives us huge benefit and huge rebates on these solar panels and other efficiencies. The reason why it says energy efficiencies is there's a new type of wind power which is in production right now. It's in prototype phase. That could be an option for the building too. That's better for, it doesn't have long-lasting chemicals in it. It's better for the environment. And I think that there is also a limit on how long we hold these funds in order to be able to expend them. And so to save our taxpayers money on energy in the future and to get a renewable source of energy into our schools, there is a time limit in terms of both the Inflation Reduction Act and the spending of these monies.
Okay, now we are debating the amendment at this point. So are there any questions relating to the amendment? I see David Clark back there who hasn't spoken. David?
David Clark. Okay, I believe that what Bob Woodford is proposing to require either a special meeting or a discussion here in this room a year from now. It does occur to me that some of these needs, at least in terms of security, could be considered to be fairly urgent needs as far as I'm concerned. And I certainly agree with Bob's premise here that the school board would change their minds. However, I think that we elected this school board in good faith, and we have a sort of a fundamental civic obligation to trust not only their judgment, but also to trust our school board. So I will be opposing this amendment.
Thank you, David. I have seen Stephen Major raise his hand. Has not spoken.
Stephen Major. I want to concur with David Clark that we ought to oppose this amendment. I think there's ample reasons, notably that about school security, that we want to act on it before we might schedule another special town meeting or wait till next year. And I do want to point out that these series of articles are basically good stewardship of the fund balances from previous years that are spreading the costs of running the schools over several years and or investing in projects which will reduce our future expenditure. So it's collectively, these all articles together are a way of reducing our future expenditures and evening out our budget. So they seem broadly a good idea, and I would trust the board on this one too.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Any other questions? Yes, back over here to Sarah.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that the school board meetings are also open, and they've been very transparent in their process and how this has been going on for months, yes. I've only tuned into a few, but this has been a very open discussion with community members who choose to participate. So I would just encourage, this isn't just like showing up today and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, this has been very transparent, and many of us have been aware of this research has been going on over some time. So that's all. I just encourage people to tune in if they don't want to be so surprised.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, thank you.
I'm Richard Crocker. I would like to call the question on amending this article, and I think that we need to, there's enough discussion.
Okay, Richard has called the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes, second by Matt Conklin. It's non-debatable, so all those in favor of calling the question, and it has to be a 2/3 majority vote, as I understand. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, for sure, more than 2/3 said aye, so we will move right on to a vote on the amendment. The amendment is to strike the words "and to authorize the board to expend such funds," so that the motion would then read, if we pass this amendment, shall the voters apply the sum of $520,000 from the 2021 fund balance and $250,000 from the 2022 fund balance to create a reserve fund for repairs or improvements to buildings, including, although not limited to, enhanced security and energy efficiencies. All those in, let's see, where am I now? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. All right, the amendment fails, and the motion now reads, shall the voters apply the sum of $520,000 from the 2021 fund balance and $250,000 from the 2022 fund balance to create a reserve fund for repairs or improvements to buildings, including, although not limited to, enhanced security and energy efficiencies, and to authorize the board to expend such funds. Any further discussion on the main motion? Yes, over here, June. Speaker.
Hi, I was wondering if anyone looked into the zoning regulations the town of Westminster has for the village for solar panels.
Thank you, June. Board's queries.
I don't know about the zoning. That's a good question, but the solar panel, the
have a lot of land.
the current thinking was to put them on the roof. And we need to do a little bit more research to know if the roof can support the weight and stuff like that. So we have not looked into the zoning if we would need to put them on the ground. Apparently, Simon, this might be a good time for you to chime in. Apparently the zoning rules and the application and all that process would be different if we had to put them on the ground. But now, for now, the thinking is the roof. That's what we're hoping for.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the main motion, which I've now read enough times, I think. All those in favor of Article 7, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. I believe the ayes have it, and the motion, the Article 7 passes. Okay, moving on to Article 8. Article 8 reads, shall the voters approve use of up to $140,000 of surplus funds from the 2021 fund balance and up to $105,000 from the anticipated 2022 fund balance to enhance indoor and outdoor learning environments, as well as community engagement for purposes including and not limited to improving outdoor learning and play areas for pre-K through 6th grade students at the Westminster Center School and Westminster West School buildings, providing additional shelter, outdoor classroom spaces, tools for hands-on learning, supplies and accommodations for children with special needs, enhanced landscapes and garden areas for outdoor learning, providing musical instruments, arts and sports or recreational equipment for qualifying students, and providing for transportation and related costs for field trips and or mentoring opportunities for students within the broader community and region. What is your pleasure?
I'm Team Bealsey, I so move.
The Article 8 has been moved, and is there a second? Seconded by Ian Proctor. I beg your pardon, Ian?
Just seconds.
Just seconded. Okay, Article 8. Shall the voters approve use of up to $140,000 of surplus funds for the 2021, let's move one of those back and forth, maybe. Shall the voters approve use of up to $140,000 of surplus funds from the 2021 fund balance and up to $105,000 from the anticipated 2022 fund balance to enhance indoor and outdoor learning environments as well as community engagement for purposes including and not limited to improving outdoor learning and play areas for pre-K through 6th grade students at the Westminster Center School and Westminster West School buildings, providing additional shelter, outdoor classroom spaces, tools for hands-on learning, supplies and accommodations for children with special needs, enhanced landscapes and garden areas for outdoor learning, providing musical instruments, arts, and sports or recreational equipment for qualifying students, and providing for transportation and related costs for field trips and or mentoring opportunities for students within the broader community and region. Okay, is there any explanation from the school board? If the school board cares to offer? Not immediately, so are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 8 say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Article 8 carries, passes. Article 9. Shall the voters approve an annual compensation to school directors in the amount of $800 to each director and an additional $200 to the director who serves as board chair? What is your pleasure? Cheryl Charles has moved this Article 9. Shall the voters approve an annual compensation to school directors in the amount of $800 to each director and an additional $200 to the director who serves as board chair? Is there a second? Yes, seconded by Mr. Bosley. Okay, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 9, shall the voters approve the annual compensation to school directors in the amount of $800 to each director and an additional $200 to the director who serves as board chair? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion, Article 9, carries. Okay, moving on to Article 10. Shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District approve the school board to expend the sum of $5,149,731, which is the amount the board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, with the $300,000 reduction proposed in Article 3, will result in education spending of $21,888 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 14.4% higher than spending for the current year without the reduction using surplus funds. The projected spending per equalized pupil is $23,266. I believe I read that correctly.
Charlie Hutcherson, I so moved.
Okay, Article 10 has been moved by Charlie, and it reads, shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District approve the school board to expend the sum of $5,149,731, which is the amount the board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, with the $300,000 reduction proposed in Article 3, will result in education spending of $21,888 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 14.4% higher than spending for the current year. Without the reduction using surplus funds, the projected spending per equalized pupil is $23,266. Okay, is there a second? Yes, seconded over here by Lisa Merton. Okay, any explanation from the school board? School board? No. Okay, any questions? Mr. Whitberg.
Before I ask my question, I want to make one comment about the transparency of this process, since the issue of transparency was raised earlier, and I'll direct this to the board. You scheduled a hearing about the budget during school vacation week. Now, I happen to be one of those people who work at a school, so that's when I go on vacation, and I'm sure that's when a lot of the parents also go on vacation. So I'd appreciate it if you would not schedule the budget hearing in the middle of vacation. Okay? That's my comment. My question is, why the large increase in per pupil, equalized pupil spending? And an auxiliary question is on page 43. I realize there's a spreadsheet there, and it's not your spreadsheet, it's the state's spreadsheet. But it projects the 14.4% increase in equalized pupil spending, but only like a 4% increase in taxes. And I'm kind of wondering if you've done any research into how does that work? I mean, usually your tax rate sort of tracks your equalized pupil spending. So have you done any research, and are we sure that that's really going to be the net effect of this? But I also want to know why the per pupil spending has jumped so far, so fast.
Thank you, Bob. The board has been queried.
Yeah, so there is a frequently asked question sheet that actually answers that question. One of the reasons is there's a huge increase in the cost of health insurance for teachers. That is a big cause of the rise. There's, state required health insurance costs. There's also inflation, which I'm sure we're all very aware of, given every time we go to the grocery store, our groceries are quite a bit more. But inflation is part of it. So if inflation is everywhere in the economy, it's also going to hit the school district. And then there is also the cost of, Westminster is one of those unique schools where sometimes there's like a bubble class, so there might be 2 6th grades one year and then 1 6th grade the next year. There happens to be 2 larger cohorts going into 7th and 8th grade, and so the cost of sending the students to the middle school is also one of the costs that is raising the school budget.
Thank you, Dean. Charlie, you have something to add?
I could add to that in addition to all that, Rockingham has calculated their expenses at a much higher rate this year than in previous years. So the cost for all the 63 or whatever it is, middle school students who go from Westminster to Bella Falls Middle School has gone up by 62%. So that's the hugest increase in this budget.
So question 2 was about tax rate and the effect of it. Have you done any research on it?
I can't speak to that.
Cheryl?
Thank you. Well, looking at the sheet that you were looking at, we picked up those numbers from the state of Vermont, and in the frequently asked questions document that we prepared for you, question 2 is what are the implications for the tax rates? And based on the information from the state, the district equalized homestead tax rate is anticipated to be 1.4141. That compares to 1.4369 in the current year. So it's a modest reduction. This is based on information from the state. And I think a related question about the equalized per pupil spending is the fact that there's an education spending threshold that the state establishes. And I think a number of people rightly are concerned about whether we would exceed that threshold. And I think it's important to know 2 things. The state has waived the penalty. Had we exceeded the threshold, we would be penalized, except that the state has waived it. And they waived it, according to that tax sheet in the book, to 2029. So this is a consideration by the state, looking at, I think, all of the things, inflation included, that are the factors that are affecting the tax rate. But I also want, and if we state this in this frequently asked questions document, we have managed, despite all these pressures, to stay below the threshold. We have not exceeded the state's established ceiling for tax rates. So we'll do our best to stay that way. I hope that answers at least a little bit of your question.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 10, which reads, shall the voters of the Westminster Town School District approve the school budget, approve the school board to expend the sum of $5,149,731, which is the amount the board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, with the $300,000 reduction proposed in Article 3, will result in education spending of $21,888 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 14.4% higher than spending for the current year. Without the reduction using surplus funds, projected spending per equalized pupil is $23,266. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. And that, the motion carries. Is there any other business to be brought before the school board? Adrian Major.
Thank you very much, Adrian Major. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the work that the school board has done this year under difficult circumstances, and particularly to thank you, Cheryl, for your comments at the beginning of today's meeting. They helped answer many of the questions that I had coming in. They were clear, they were concise, and they were very well put. Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Adrian. Any other business to be brought before the board? Molly Bannock.
Mr. Moderator, is now a time where I can speak about the high school articles for a minute?
Why not?
1 minute, is that what you said?
Why not? Please go ahead.
So there's some articles that are going to be voted on Tuesday, and I did a lot of work on this, so I wanted to kind of explain them a little bit, because if you don't know anything about them and you go and vote, you're going to think, you know, what are they crazy? But one of the things that has happened in this high school for years and years is the administration has level funded their budgets, which makes them look like the heroes until we start looking at things and figure out how long we've let things get run down and not repaired items. And so we have a couple articles, Article 7 and Article 8, that are $2 million bonds. I asked for information on bonds because one of the things that I hear in the background from people are they hear all these stories about all the ESSER funds, so why are you asking for some bonds? Well, we got so much to do that there isn't enough ESSER money out there to take care of what really should happen to get the school back up to 2023. You know, if anybody wants to go look at some of the restrooms and the shapes they're in and walk down through and look at the cubbies that were made in 1970 when they opened up the school, we haven't really done a great job at making our school stay updated. It was brought to my attention during a Haver grant meeting. I've been in the high school board for a few years, haven't heard a thing about the science department needing help. And this teacher comes in and says, is there any money for this? And we did a walkthrough of the school, and there is no science room. There's a couple benches and some chairs. They've got no water, they've got no gas, they've got nothing. So this is something that I've pushed to try to do some upgrading of the high school. I'm not trying to spend money we don't have, but I am trying to do a better job at not making it look like, why do kids even want to come here? It's dingy and dirty, it's dark brown, it's time to do a few things to get it cleaned up. So the ESSER funds is going to help us in the interior of the building do some of these projects that are going to make things the way they ought to be. The bonds, there's a $2 million bond fix the driveway, repave the driveway. The biggest thing is the drainage. We have the drainage has failed, and we got to dig up the parking lot to fix the drainage. If we're going to do that, then by God, we ought to fix the potholes and the pavement too. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to get that done this year, because the other $2 million bond is to replace the roof, fix the roof. Maybe some places don't need to replace, but a lot of it does. And during that process, we're also working on our HVAC system. So we're probably not going to see a new driveway and a new parking lot this summer, because it doesn't make any sense to do that and then bring cranes in to fix the HVAC and the roof. But I only got 2 more years on the board, and I promised my husband I wouldn't do it again. So I got 2 years to try to get this, to try to get people to start thinking about what are we doing here. Because, you know, we talk all doom and gloom, we throw on Facebook what a terrible job we're doing, we're not trying to embarrass ourselves. So that's what my $2 million bonds are for, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Molly. And where could people read those articles before they go to vote?
There's high school report right up here.
Right in the back. So get a sample, get a copy of that so you can review it yourself. Okay, thank you, Molly. Any other business before the school district? Okay, thank you, school board members. I think we have made a lot of work for you for this coming year. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the end of the school district annual meeting. I will note, because of the storm, that we are without a lunch today. And the time now is 11:45. I beg your pardon?
Keep going.
Let's keep going. Okay, I'm happy to keep going, and so unless there's any objection, we'll keep at it. Okay, I will now ask the members of the Prudential Committee to come forward, since the fire district is the next meeting we take up. Fire district. Okay, we're moving on to Article 11, to hear the reports of the Town Fire District Number 3 and take action thereon. Cole, is there a report you want to say verbally, or just refer to people in the town
Yeah,
report?
I think we've written in the town report that reflects.
Okay, great. Then we will move on to Article 12, to see whether Town Fire District Number 3 shall authorize and instruct its Prudential Committee and Treasurer to borrow money if necessary to meet current expenses on the credit of the district and to anticipation of the collection of taxes and or the receipt of any state or federal funds. What is your pleasure?
Katie Dearborn, I move Article 12 as printed.
Katie Dearborn has moved Article 12 to see whether the Town Fire District Number 3 shall authorize and instruct its Prudential Committee and Treasurer to borrow money if necessary to meet current expenses on the credit of the district in anticipation of the collection of taxes and or the receipt of any state or federal funds. Is there a second?
Kevin Hughes, second.
Kevin Hughes has seconded Article 12. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 12, as I just read, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Article 12 passes. Article 13, to see if the voters of the Town Fire District Number 3 will raise and appropriate the sum of $317,800 to pay the indebtedness and other general expenses of the district for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023, and ending June 30, 2024. What is your pleasure?
Katie Dearborn, I move Article 13 as printed.
Katie Dearborn has just moved Article 13 to see if the voters of the Town Fire District Number 3 will raise and appropriate the sum of $317,800 to pay the indebtedness and other general expenses of the district for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. Any questions? Comments? Yes. John Ewald back there.
Is there a fund balance for the fiscal year ending in '22?
So our audit that had been completed was in draft form. The audit company that we use has a tendency not to actually turn around our audit very quickly. What I can speak to is the capital reserve fund and what we have in there and what that looks like, ending '22. But I don't have any specific numbers other than that one piece of our capital reserve, just because we follow that fairly closely, especially because over the last year there were some things that transpired. We had originally planned to get a loan for a rescue truck. We were able to secure the chassis of the truck, but the company that's outfitting it for us has not completed that work. So the loan payment that we had allocated as a part of our budget was never paid out, so that was then moved to our capital reserve as well. So I do have some figures on the capital reserve fund if that's what you're looking for in particular.
Well, I think in particular it would be nice to be able to see more than what you're giving us. I don't know if that's a question of an auditor getting them to get it in on time. It's really been 8 months since the fiscal year is over.
Right.
And, I think you guys do a great job. It's just that in the town report, it would be nice to know that you have like $4,000 you're spending on streetlights. I'm curious, did you spend $4,000 on streetlights? Or was it only $3,500? So that's kind of my take on it, that's all.
Point noted.
Thank you.
Absolutely can access a copy of the audit from the town office. The administrative assistant does have those. Unfortunately, it's in draft form. We haven't gotten the final back from him at this point. Typically what we do, John, is we do have an amendment that's kind of back there that's printed out. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this year, so I apologize, but certainly the information is available. And if you stop by the town office, I can make sure that there's a supply that's printed that will give you those exact numbers. I will tell you that we work very closely to our budget. The budget that we create is pretty much what we stick to. There are some end of year, adjustments that are oftentimes done in just looking at, any particular fund balance and what it looks like for a line item. But I will tell you we're pretty spot on. So I welcome you to go and grab one of those. I'll make sure that they're printed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call for a vote on Article 13, which reads, to see if the voters of the Town Fire District Number 3 will raise and appropriate the sum of $317,800 to pay the indebtedness and other general expenses of the district for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion carries. Okay, going on to Article 14. To transact any other business proper to be brought before the Town Fire District Number 3 meeting. Is there any other business? Yes, Mr. Ewald.
So speaking of solar panels, have the fire district ever thought about putting solar panels on the fire station?
Yeah, I will tell you, we actually had a recent discussion about that. And so I think that that's some planning that we're looking at. There are a couple of things I actually would like to address that kind of happened over the last year. I thought there'd be a little more discussion under the budget dollar amount. So if you don't mind, John, I'm going to kind of spin this conversation into just really a summary of kind of where we are as the Prudential Committee, and that will give a little insight into your question, comment. Over the last year, we have experienced a record number of calls. We did need to take a look at our budget so that we could increase the mileage because we have a lot of participation amongst the volunteers. We additionally have a new reporting system that's required of us so that we can get the number of fire calls to the state appropriately. So there is an additional $3,500 expense that we have in doing that in order to just be compliant. We were able to secure some money through the ARPA fund, which has been a really nice relationship between the Prudential Committee, the chief, and the town and the committee that's administering that. We were able to get a new generator, we got a new washing machine, and additionally we got some new gear for our guys. ARPA funds are still available, so the last meeting that we had a discussion about our building. We had a discussion briefly about solar, and any improvements that really can be done to that building with the ARPA funds potentially to limit the amount that taxpayers would have to make as a contribution to it. So I think, over the next year, we certainly will look into the building, any kind of solar. Our electricity costs are high because of our heating in the building and our cooling in the building, along with, other electricity expenses. So that was a line item that did go up that we discussed the solar component when we were looking at that specific item. So I hope that answers your questions. We do have meetings typically once a month. They are warned, anyone is welcome to attend them. It's pretty impressive the number of volunteers that we have. I know that none of us want to be recipients of their service, but it's really refreshing to know that we've got the number of people out there supporting us. And I'm really proud of what Cole does and the budget that we come back with. There are some real expenses that we have no control over. One of our largest expenses is our mutual aid, our 911 dispatching. There's no way around it. It's hovering around $50,000 a year, and that chunk of money that we have to pay out is pretty extensive. So. Otherwise, we're going to keep working on our rescue truck, which hopefully will be outfitted this year, hopefully before we come and see you next year for a new budget. Otherwise, we continue to put some money in our capital reserves because we do have our eye on a new engine probably in the next 5 to 7 years. So that's all I have. Cole, do you have anything you want to add?
That pretty much sums it up, yeah. We're being just as frugal as we can, but in 2022, we had 498 calls. So 67 calls in the month of December. So we've really worked hard, and I want to thank all the taxpayers that support us and the volunteers for the department.
One other quick question. A couple of years ago, we paid for a study to see about how I think it was the upstairs of the firehouse. Was that done, and was there any results?
Yeah, so that was done. It was done by a gentleman over in the Dover area. Basically, it indicated to us that the upstairs, which is what we were kind of looking at, which is unfinished, we were looking at sleeping quarters, kind of what that could look like. The plan that he came back with was pretty extensive, and there was a lot of cost behind it. So at our last meeting when we were discussing the building, we actually discussed that report and revisiting it, but maybe looking to make some changes to any of his recommendations or querying him, because the cost that was involved in making the changes that he thought appropriate was really pretty cost prohibitive in my eyes.
Well, thanks for what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the Prudential Committee? Okay, thank you, Prudential Committee, and thank you all volunteer firefighters and EMT folks. we will move right on to the town meeting. So I'm going to ask the select board members to come forward. Great. Okay. I'll now open the town district meeting and start with Article 15 to hear the reports of the town officers and take action thereupon. Any words you'd like to say, Select Board? Jason, anything about town reports you'd like to say under Article 15?
Town report, no. Not that I have personally. I'm not a very good public speaker, so bear with me. I'm your current chair. I'd like to thank Kevin for his support last year. Whole board, actually, Craig for almost 20 years of service. Chip with Nimerick for helping us out. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. It's not an easy job, and I just want to thank everybody for their support.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Moving on to Article 16. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize total general fund expenditures for operating expenses of $2,632,577, of which $2,099,397 shall be raised by taxes and $533,180 by estimated revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. What is your pleasure?
I move Article 16 as written.
Okay, Kevin Hughes moves Article 16 as written. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize the total general fund expenditures for operating expenses of $2,632,577, of which $2,099,397 shall be raised by taxes and $533,180 by estimated revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. Is there a second? Katie Dearborn has seconded. Thank you. And does the board wish to say anything about this motion? No one's jumping to, so we'll move on to any questions or comments from the voters. Stephen Major.
Stephen Major. In previous years, we've had some question about whether the articles to follow in this case are included in this article for the town budget. It looks to me like this is the base town budget, and then the articles to follow each add their respective amount to that budget. Just wanted to clarify whether that is indeed the case this year. I know we had a long debate about it last year. Just wanted to figure out what the case is.
It's a good question, and
that's a good point. And the answer is yes, except in Article 19, if you pass that one, it actually reduced the taxes. So that $2,099,000 doesn't have the two that we're going to ask, but it also doesn't have the credit that we'll ask.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We've got a question from Susan Harlow.
Susan Harlow. The audit is not complete yet, is that correct? And so usually in the audit, that's where we had the information on the reserve funds. So my question is there any money in the emergency reserve fund? And if so, how much is that?
Okay, the board isn't queried. Any?
So we do have Chip here from NIMRIC to answer any of the specific money questions on that. And you're correct, it's not available. The audit is not done, but it's not a full audit. It's a review year audit. So
Yeah, but it
doesn't make it any less important, but
it
it's
has the information on the.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, and so you're asking whether Chip might be able to?
I believe so.
Answer that. And unless there's any objection, because Chip is not a voter, town voter, but unless there's any objection, I'm going to ask Chip to talk about that reserve fund.
Chip Stearns from NIMRIC. I just want to make sure you're asking about what is labeled as emergency management fund.
No.
Which one?
I think we call it the Emergency Reserve Fund, right? That's the official name that we set up a couple of years ago.
Would that be the contingency?
Probably. Not the rainy day.
Not the rainy day.
No. Try contingency and see how that works.
Okay, contingency fund has nothing in it because last year you voted to move $150,000 towards FEMA. Okay, is that the fund?
I'm assuming. I'm assuming we spent that.
Yes. By public vote, we moved 250,000. 150 of it from contingency.
Okay, and so that zeroes it out at this point.
That is gone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments regarding Article 16? Yes, John Ewald.
Yes, I'm looking for the end of the fiscal year, how much cash we had on hand, because normally this is something that we get in our town report. You know, just, so those are the questions I have, because you can go through the town report and you can find out your, questions you have and see if you can get the answers. So I guess that would be what was our cash balance at the end of the fiscal year?
Okay, the board is prepared. Any answer to that?
I would address that to Chip as well. I don't have that.
Okay.
So there's a relative easy question. However, it's complicated by, we have lots of cash, almost $3 million. However, we have a lot of it restricted. So is your question, how much is available in, if you will, cash for general fund and highway operations? Is that your question?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
Okay. So during this last year, we actually, the town broke the general fund into two funds so that we have general operations and highways separated. Okay? So within the general fund, at the end of the fiscal year 22, there's $155,650.95 in what would be cash available. And in the highway fund, $73,055.61 in cash. So, is that sufficient for your answer? Because I said we got almost $3 million in cash. We have a lot of ARPA money, a lot of reserve for paving, a lot of reserve for the garage, several pockets out there of committed money. So when you ask the question, how much cash do we have? That's a loaded question. I can tell you how much is in the banks, but not how much is available to use as resource for offsetting taxes. I think those are two different questions, and I'm thinking you're wanting the taxes one.
Well, I think I would want to know what was.
Microphone.
It would be. I mean, I guess get back to the point. It would be nice that it was in the report. I would like to know what's in the reappraisal fund. You know, stuff like that. But so I guess I'll wait till next year.
Okay.
I can answer the reappraisal.
Go.
Reappraisal, 187,381.28.
Okay, and thank you, Chip. Any other questions? Stephen Major over here.
Stephen Major. Last year, I believe we had a lot of discussion about a town garage and redoing or remaking a town garage. But it wasn't a warrant article, so we couldn't move forward on it then. Here we have a mention of funds for town garage. So is there now there's no article here about it, but is there a plan to be saving money for it, or what's the story now?
Question about the town garage.
So there was a loose committee that had met several times, looked at the garage we had, came up with numbers of what it would take to bring what we have up to, I don't know, up to snuff's not the right word, but so we could fit everything we own in the building. I believe it's stalled at this point. Paul Bannock was on that committee. He might know something different than I do, but we need to work on our capital improvement for all of our buildings, and that one included. Where do we want to go with it? Do we want to go a new building? Do we want to put money into the one we have? It's definitely, as soon as this meeting is over and the voting is done, that's on first thing on our list is 5-year capital plan. So I know they're remodeling part of the inside to have a bit bigger office and a bigger break room upstairs. The heating system is going to be upgraded. The wood boiler is no longer any good, but the system they're upgrading can be moved to a new building if we don't go that route. So I think it's kind of at a stalemate right now, but it's part of the plan. So.
Good question. Thank you, Jason. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Susan Harlow.
Susan Harlow, I have another reserve fund question. So we're putting $15,000 into the bridge fund. What will that bring the bridge fund up to? And do you foresee that's going to be sufficient? I'm not sure the status of the bridges. Have they been pushed back, or I don't really know, but Jason?
Last I believe we heard, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, the bridge on 121 is most likely going to occur in the 2025 construction season. The cost, I have no idea what the cost is going to be, and it's going to be significantly more than what we had originally anticipated. Chip can give us that number, I believe. I want to say it's 165 is what we'll end up with, but that's totally off the top of my head.
Jason's close, 167, 129.62. And that's today's value with this year's budget already having contributed.
Thank you.
So while we're talking about bridges, we also have 2 other bridges that are going to need some work in the next, I don't know, I think it's 2 or 3 years. Chuck has the reports, but the one in Westminster West on the, what do they call that? Butler's Pantry. That bridge needs a new membrane, a deck. I think it needs a deck. And the one on Goldie's Road needs, I think that's some incidental repairs, but they're all going to cost, a fair bit of money. So, and hopefully they don't all come together at the same time. It seems like they might be pretty close though, so it's going to be a pretty good chunk of money to do all those.
Any other questions? Yes, looks like Paul.
Paul Bannock. This is a general question. I'm not sure who to point to for an answer, but I'll start with the select board. It's come to my understanding that there was a decision made to merge the town fund, the town budget, and the garage budget together again. I thought we made a choice and a decision last year to separate those. The basis for me asking this question is, as I said, it's come to my attention, but doesn't that raise troubles when grant monies are sought and awarded? Putting them into a town budget kind of penalizes the people who did the work, looking for the grant money in the first place, and then redirecting that money to something possibly other than what the grant was written for. If I could get the clearest, quickest answer for that, I'd be satisfied.
Can you clarify for me, Paul? The very beginning of the question?
Simplest I'll ask it again. Was there a merge? Did the two budgets get put together after we made a choice last year to separate them?
No, the budgets are still separated. We're still voting on the bottom line number. So I guess in the article, it does look like they've been merged, but they're not. They're still separated. The highway has their funds, general fund has their funds.
So we can clearly find a breakout.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Yes, over here, Lisa.
Doesn't that mean we have to vote on the proposed highway budget if it's separate? There's no article about it.
They were never separated. They were never meant to be separated and voted on separately. It was for transparency when doing the budget, so you can see what the highway expenses are, what the highway revenue is. But it wouldn't matter. You're going to vote A and B. They're still going to meet the same, and the bottom number is still going to be the same.
So this amount in Article 16 includes the highway budget?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about Article 16? Seeing none, we will vote. Article 16, shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize total general fund expenditures for operating expenses of $2,632,577, of which $2,099,397 shall be raised by taxes and $533,180 by estimated revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Article 16 carries. Moving on to Article 17. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the Westminster West Library to join the Catamount Library Network to pay for additional librarian hours and additional annual costs associated with joining the network? What is your pleasure?
Jason Perry, I move Article 17 as written.
Jason Perry has moved Article 17. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the Westminster West Library to join the Catamount Library Network to pay for additional librarian hours and additional annual costs associated with joining the network? Is there a second? Yes, second.
Crocker, I second it.
Great, thank you, Dave. Okay, any questions or comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm Abby Wardich. I'm the board chair of the Westminster West Library, and thank you all for being here today despite this weather. We have had a really big year at the library. We have officially fully launched onto the Catamount Network, which is a consortium of 23 libraries. That means that all of our members, which is everybody in Westminster and Westminster West, can go onto their computer browse the catalogs of these libraries and reserve materials. They're brought to the Westminster West Library by a library courier, and you can go pick them up. It's a really amazing system. It's like having access to 23 libraries in one part, which is just incredible. And 2 weeks ago, we also launched our Palace app, which gives you access to audiobooks and ebooks on your phones and tablets as well. We resumed our regular scheduled programming. We've also started a couple new programs, such as Musical Mondays for kids, and a couple Dungeons and Dragons groups for teenagers, if you like teenagers who are interested in that. We did have to accept the resignation of our long-term board member and president, Emily Weinberg, this year. We really spearheaded us through the automation program, and she'll be sorely missed. But as we look to the future, we are beginning to refresh our strategic plan and look at what is coming next. And we'd like to hear from you guys as to how you have enjoyed the Catamount Network and what you'd like to see from us. So please feel free to stop by the library, check out some snowshoes if you want to enjoy the weather, or jigsaw puzzles if you want to stay inside. And just let us know how we're doing. This is our third year asking for the $7,000, which means that it would permanently be in the town budget moving forward. This $7,000 goes directly to covering the cost of us remaining in the Catamount Network. This includes the annual membership fee, the interlibrary courier service, and just making sure that our collection is in good condition, so as the books go around with the Westminster Town Meeting side of them, that we're well represented. I would just like to thank you guys for your support, and thank you for your continued support as well.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this article? Okay, then we'll move on to a vote of Article 17. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the Westminster West Library to join the Catamount Library Network, to pay for additional librarian hours and additional annual costs associated with joining the network? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Article 18. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 for law enforcement coverage from the Windham County Sheriff Department? What is your pleasure?
Katrina Hamilton, I move the motion as written.
Article
as written.
Katrina moves Article 18. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 for law enforcement coverage from the Windham County Sheriff Department? Is there a second?
Mr. Moderator, this is Craig.
Yeah.
I'd like to make an amendment to that motion.
I think, Craig, why don't we get a second before you make an amendment? Yes.
Second.
Okay, seconded by. Okay, Craig.
I'd like to amend that we strike from the word coverage, get rid of the word from the Windham County Sheriff Department. I'd be willing to talk about that. So that basically we would still have the same motion, but it wouldn't say from the Windham County Sheriff. So we would have coverage, but we could choose who we wanted to have coverage with.
Okay.
By changing that word.
Great. Craig Allen has proposed an amendment, which, as I gather, would just strike the last 6 words from this article, and so it would read, shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 for law enforcement coverage. Is that correct?
That's correct. Obviously,
hold on a second, Craig. Let me just see whether there's a second to that amendment. Is there a second to that amendment? Katie Dearborn is seconded. Yes, Craig.
Obviously, being an article, we had a hard time as a select board to even try to decide what to do. Last year, we did come to you. I think I was the one to even mention it. We wanted some money to continue on with some kind of a service. And we will tell you today that we didn't get much for service at all from the Windham County Sheriff Department. We were very unsatisfied with the coverage, as now they've not even covered the hours that we contracted them to do. Speaking of that, though, at the same time, I mean, our town population, we're getting older, we need more security, we need some kind of a law enforcement to go around and be of service. We're getting no service from the police. If we call them for emergency or anything, they don't even show up for hours. We need to be able to explore explore different options. I think the select board needs to look at, we contacted like even the Bellows Falls Police Department, but we need to start looking at, if they're not going to do it, what other kind of service can we get? Can we get together with other, or even hire somebody? By making an article, the money has to stay in that Pacifica line item, so that basically we can only spend it on police enforcement or security or some kind of a way of covering our town. And that's why the article is there, because we're just not happy with the Sheriff's Department. If we could still work it out with them, that would still be an option too, but by taking the words out, we would be able to have, the select board would have more of an option of what they could do.
Thank you, Greg. So we are discussing an amendment to strike the last 6 words from the Article 18. Are there questions or comments regarding this amendment? Yes.
So there's the possibility of using Bellows Falls department, not a sheriff's department, but that's one question I have. And then the other question I have, so I guess the first question is, who else is available to provide the coverage? And the second question is, what does coverage mean? What is included in our coverage?
So as a board, we had met with the Rockingham town manager and had a very loose discussion about the possibility of paying for Bellows Falls services versus the Windham County Sheriff. We had talked at one time about even Walpole possibly. We talked about, does it make sense to hire our own person? There's other options, and as Craig said, when you take that wording out, it allows you to have those options, where if that's only the Sheriff's Department, that's only the Sheriff's Department. They're not real responsive, and when you say coverage, that's a great question. This pamphlet's in the back, and this comes off their portal, so Ally can get on it, and this is how we're built. And we don't even know when they're in town. We don't know what they're doing in town. We just get a bill. The animal control has been really good. People seem to really like her. She does a great job. But as far as coverage, it's really not great. It's really not great at all. But they still send a bill. So we're not getting what we're paying for. And last year we went from 90,000 to 60,000, and maybe we shot ourselves in the foot with that too. I don't really know, but there's not a lot of happy people with them, and we're not happy with them, so we left it as a separate article.
Okay, any further questions? Let me go over here to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious in this discussion. So I live in West West, and I know there was a series of like break-ins in Putney and West West a while back, and there would be like a trooper going down our road sometimes. There were some posts on the Facebook group. Who was that? Was that like does Putney have a police department, or was that Windham County Sheriff?
Putney contracts with the Sheriff's Department as well. I believe they just signed a $104,000 contract.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the time. I think it might be 40 hours. I don't really know, but it's a pretty good chunk of money.
Yeah.
And they seem happy with them, and I'm not real sure why we don't get that same.
Yeah. It would be cool though. I guess just thinking about like West West versus like this part of Westminster. To make sure we had like. Because Bellows Falls is much closer to here. Like if there was an issue way over there, is there someone else that we could also have in the mix?
State police. If you were your house was being robbed right now, and you called state police, they might show up, but they're covering a huge area. We've been told several times that that's not what they do. They do investigations. They might do an accident on the highway. Just a general patrol. Hey, I got speeding in my neighborhood. You're not going to see them. They're not going to do it. You'd be better off. There's not a good answer to it.
Okay, I think why don't we go out back there to Ms. Christine.
Peter Stanley. I'd just like to say that town meeting is customary for people to identify themselves and stand up if they're capable of doing that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Let's go down. I think Charles
Hi, Charlie Hutchison. I'm surprised by this $60,000 number. It seems like not a lot of money for whatever coverage means. And I'm interested to hear that you reduced it from 90 to 60, and I'm wondering what was the thinking there? What would one expect to get for 60 grand? One wouldn't even pay the salary of one trooper for that.
I know it was reduced last year for the same reasons. That we're not getting what we're paying for, so why are we paying for it? Let's drop it down and go from there. And it hasn't gotten a lot better, so.
Okay, let's move over here to.
Basically, what he was just saying, that we originally hired the sheriff's department and we were going to share a full-time officer with Putney. That was the original goal. And it started out very well for the first 3 or 4 years. And they had one, we had one, they could help cover each other. And then all of a sudden the sheriff's department was just missing help. And we were paying and not even get the service of a half a person. We came back to the last few years and we started out with a 40-hour, and we were already getting, like he said, 20 hours. That's why we cut it back, because they still owed us so many hours last year that at 60,000 and all the hours they didn't work, we were thinking we were still getting a full-time service. That's why we cut it to 60. Here we are at 60 again, and they still owe us hours. And that's why we're just, okay, how much longer we keep going if we're not going to get 40 hours or 30 hours or even 20 hours of service. And the service is important because the state police only investigates, like he says. The sheriff's there to monitor, look at dog problems, look at other problems, and then, like I said, they monitor our neighborhood. They should be going and seeing our town manager and say, where's the problem, where's the complaint? And when it works very well when you do have somebody.
Okay, yeah.
Chris Hines, I think, I was going to ask a question, I think it may have already been answered, and that is with the 60,000 for the coverage. It sounds like there's not really a way for the select board to measure utilization in terms of what that is, like regular reports that would be tied to these expenditures or this salary. I also noticed there's 2 very tiny items in the budget on a related note, and that would be maybe 5,000 mental health and the Windham County Youth Services. So I'm thinking about obviously the collaboration of law enforcement where young people's lives or issues are concerned. So is it the case then that it's not possible to tie specific utilization expectations with hours or other things to the budget without either a liaison or just total trust for what essentially is like a monopoly over law enforcement?
I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know. My feeling is when the sheriff signs into Westminster, the first call they should make is to town hall. Where's the problems? Who's been calling? Is it this road? Is it that road? And concentrate there first. This log, patrol Route 5. What does that mean? You stopped on Route 5 and sat there for an hour and a half? Did you just drive down Route 5? There's not a lot of explanation to it. People just aren't happy.
So the board is well aware of their expectations for how these things are utilized, and I appreciate that you're paying attention to that.
Before my time, as Craig said, the sheriff used to come to a meeting every once in a while. Hey, how's it going? What do you guys need? Are we doing all right? I haven't seen one in 2 years, unless we invited him, and it was Mark himself. So, the communication could be better too on everybody's part. But when we call, we'll call to serve papers or something like that. You can't get them to do anything. A traffic stop, now they're making money on a traffic stop, so they might do that. They'll be patrolling, they'll sit on back Westminster Road because they're going to make money on it. So.
Okay, any further questions? Stephen Major, you've had your hand up for a while.
Stephen Major. Just noting on page 12, there's salary for an animal control officer of $7,400. I don't know if this is the sheriff's department person, but as a large departmental veterinarian, I've been working with the Sheriff's Department Animal Control Officer. She does a super job.
Ashley?
Yes, and she is a sort of person who works collaboratively with the people who have, her neighbors who are questioning what's going on, etc. And keeps everything low-key and gets the animals what they need. So that little bit is working well. I don't know whether that falls under the animal control officer. Senator, you're shaking your head no.
I believe they're totally separate.
So if we hire Ashley, that's great from a veterinary point of view. And I know she's part of the Sheriff's Department. That's the only part of the Sheriff's Department I have an interaction with, but that is a positive part. But clearly that is not the entire purpose of the contract.
Ally can confirm that people really are, Ashley does a great job. People have a complaint, she takes great care of it, she's very cordial to people, everything is really good on that end. We just can't get the other end to...
So we have a $60,000 animal control officer. Maybe it's worth it.
Well, willing to try it.
Okay, any other questions? Or Ally, did you have anything to add to that? Okay, is there any objection to Ally speaking? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. We are contracted for 103 hours a month for the sheriff. I have called numerous times since I've sat in the office, coming on a year now in April. It's very, very disappointing. Almost every call that I've made there's no officer on duty. And when I've asked, when there is an officer on duty, could we possibly have someone check in with us? And no. And they haven't, and I asked Mark to come to a meeting to address this, and he wasn't even apologetic. I have no horse in the race. I don't have any type of solution for you, but to me, Town of Westminster deserves better. That's all.
And Ally, can you just clarify for us whether the $60,000 includes the money for the animal control officer?
I believe that's a separate item, because we don't have animal control. We had a number of people that were in town that were basically volunteering. They wouldn't submit a slip to be paid, but Ashley has done a wonderful job. We've had numerous problems with animals getting out up at Westminster Meets, and she's been right on it. And I know a lot of the residents are very, very happy with her.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
Hi, Jim Mendel. A question, going back to page 12, which was with that one, Stephen's question. I do see the animal control officer, $7,500 plus $500 expenses. So I guess that is separate. It makes sense. But then there's $60,000 for Sheriff's Department continued service. So the article we're talking about, it sounds to me like there's the amendment issue of removing the dedication exclusively to the Sheriff's Department. That would be discretionary for the select board to shop around, so to speak. But is that an additional, if it's the same $60,000, I just don't know how to be clear about the fact that we've got it in line 157 or 8 in the budget, but also in a separate article. It sounds like we might be accidentally duplicating it, or maybe we want to and I don't understand it, which is probably a better guess.
Thank you, Jim. Clarification on the budget and this article.
Katrina Hamilton, I believe we did include it in the budget. Then we did accidentally duplicate it.
Can we have it ask Chip to look at that?
Okay, so, yeah, Chris, Yeah, why don't we go, Katrina Hamilton says that this article may be a duplication of money that has already been voted for the sheriff or the police coverage. Chip, did you have something you wanted to say? No?
Yes. No.
Yes, okay. So Chip from Limerick is...
So I'll repeat Stephen Major's question that started. These separate articles are really included in showing of the budget so you have comparison. But the way the articles were presented is as if everything passed, that's how the budget was presented. Meaning the 60,000 is not duplicated, because if that number was 0 in the report and you were comparing 21 to 22 to what 23 would look like, 23 is a separate article for the 60,000. So comparing apples and oranges, we act like everything passed, including the next article, in the presentation of 23, but we asked them separately.
So you are, just to clarify, you were saying that the $2,632,577 that was just approved in Article 16 does not include the money that is in Article 18.
Does not include any of the subsequent articles.
Okay.
Any of the subsequent articles.
Okay, let's see, I'm going to ask, any further questions about this particular, yes, back there.
We're still on.
And keep in mind, we're on the amendment to the, this Article 18. Articles.
I'm Natalie Crocker, and I think it's time to call the questions because we're getting into so many tangents, it's getting hard to keep track of that we are just voting for the amendment. I think we need to do that and then discuss the whole amendment, which seems to have multiple complex flaws.
Good point. Okay, is there a second to that calling the question? Yes, second right here. Margie, thank you. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, so we're going to move right into a vote on striking the last few words from this Article 18 so that it then reads, Article 18, shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 for law enforcement coverage. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, so the amendment it passes, and the Article 18 now reads as printed except for the last 6 words. Any further questions about Article 18 as amended? Okay, I'll go back. Well, actually, Paul, you've had your hand up. Why don't we go back to Paul Bennett?
This is going to surprise you all. I want to thank the select board. I have a long-standing disagreement with our coverage, and I think it's an absolute waste of money in several years' time to see a cruiser from the sheriff's department sit on the side of the road. In discussions about the school having a twin entry and safety concerns, these cars should be moving all the time, no matter what the service is or who it comes from. They do no justice to anyone sitting on the side of the road writing tickets. They can do that while they patrol, they actually patrol, not sit and call them patrol. So thank you for opening up the discussion, making this choice, all of you. I think this is a smart move. I think this is a path forward to actual coverage in the town of Westminster, whether it be on the west side, the center, the east, wherever. If those cars are moving, there's coverage.
Paul, any further questions or comments? Yeah.
Natalie Crocker, and I just want to state that I'm concerned that 60,000 isn't enough. If Putney is satisfied with what they're getting and they're paying quite a bit more, I think we need to probably pass this, but continue to think about how little we are putting into this.
Thank you, Natalie. Any further comments or questions? Mr. Clark.
Kind of a long meeting, lunch, and although I'm not going to make it, someone could amend this article to include additional funding. You might possibly want to fund it at one of your previous levels of funding, and I did get a $100,000 number out there. Once we trust our school board, I think we can also trust our select board.
Hypothetical. Okay.
Any further to Metal? Oh, well, excuse me, why don't we just go over to Dan?
Yeah, Daniel Crocker. I did a little research on this. I talked to one of the Windham County sheriffs, and I said, this comes up. It's come up in the 80s. Here it is again. And he said, I said, we're spending so much money. What would you say we need to spend before it even works, before it's worthwhile? And he said you need at least 40 hours. So there you're looking at your 100 grand. So yeah, that's right. It's either we're all in or we're not. So, along with David Clark, if we're going to have coverage, we're going to have to shell out the money, because doing it halfway, this isn't going to work. So, so maybe I should propose the amendment right now that we...
Can I give you an answer to that?
Yeah, there you go.
We did. That's the whole thing, how this started. We contracted for a full-time person. They come back after a year of not doing it. They basically said, we're short-staffed. We can't get people. We don't have enough people trained. Then we even said, well, can't you split one with Putney? And then they found somebody in Putney, but they didn't find one for us. So then we said, well, the 60,000 is really more than 60,000 because they owe us all these free hours that they never covered.
I wasn't saying we should change the thing. No, not with the Windham County, but just overall.
But if you could find that service that we had a choice, then I would go along with any kind of amendment like that. But we've been pursuing it, and as a board, we're going like, okay, we want the service. And we have the sheriff's department owing us all these hours as it is. This really is enough money for a full-time. If they came back to us and said, okay, we're going to start to do it, we would have even gone out and found the money if all of a sudden they were using more hours than what we had contracted for. But we're to a point, what she's saying, the relationship with the sheriff's department is so bad, because when we started, every day they would call in, you felt like there was somebody there looking after you. We really don't have a good relationship. So we need, as the board, I'm getting off, so they need to pursue other choices on it, and if it's got to come back, I think this town will be willing to pay a lot more money. It's just that we don't have the choice right now. And you getting on the board, that might be a good assignment for you.
I'm all for the choice. I see that, but what I'm saying is that we're going to look at this. We're going to have to probably shell out a lot more money to get anything, whether it's Windham County Sheriff's or anything. So I just wanted to bring that up, that you're not going to get coverage to cover anything for 60 grand. It's going to have to be more at some point in time, no matter who does it.
Okay, thanks, Dan. We've beat around this for a while. Any further thoughts? Mr. Meto.
Yeah, I don't want to beat this to death either, so I'm going to be short, but I voted for the amendment to remove the restriction to sheriff only, to loosen that up, and I intend to vote for the $60,000 on this motion. But when I look at the budget, it's real clear to me that line 158, $60,000 is part of the total. And it says continued service sheriff's department. And I would simply suggest that this budget having been approved, and this amended motion, if it is approved, that the sense of this meeting is that $120,000 is not too much, and that it shouldn't necessarily go to the sheriff's department. I don't know if you would have the authority to change it based on how the wording of 158 is, but I'm neither an accountant nor an attorney, so it just looks to me like we want to avoid future confusion, but at the same time, we do need more service if we can get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay. Does the select board have anything to respond? No? Okay. All right. Mr. Ewald.
I mean, I'm just confused now. Did we already vote for the 60,000 or not? I mean, I thought Jim said that he thought we did.
No. We had
in our other budget. I mean,
it's not my position to come to conclusions, but I will point out that we have gotten a mixed answer on that question. And Jim is very clear about what he's observing from the town report and from the proposed budget. Chip from Limerick is quite clear that that is not the case, and I'm not sure what the select board has on that question. It is a confusing point. Yes.
and then I guess one other comment was the sheriff always came to town meeting to defend his budget, and he's not here today, right?
It's snowing.
Just a point. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And Chip, is there anything further you have to clarify about whether this money has already been, $60,000 has already been approved or not?
It has not.
It has not. You're still clear on that. Okay. All right, yes.
Margie Ferry, I know we already approved the budget, but in the future, maybe that should be the last article. The total budget should be the last article, and we would do the beginning things first. Does that make sense to everybody? That way we wouldn't have this problem. Like, we've approved the budget, but then we are doing these little pieces that are within it. Why don't we put that in the last article?
That is what the school board did.
Yeah.
Okay. Further questions? Yes, Charlie Hutchinson. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm Rachel Cohen. If you add the number on the bottom of page 15, that's the highway budget, 1449123, and the bottom number on page 13, 1250454, and then you subtract, you find that that number does not include the 60,000 for the law enforcement, or the $7,000 for the Article 17 for the West West Library. So the math shows that even though those two, that item is in the budget of 60,000, it's not totaled in the amount that's shown in Article 16 that we passed.
Thank you for that math. Okay, any further questions or comments?
Charlie Hutchinson, I'm going to go where nobody else seems to want to tread because I'm not running for any, well, I am running for office, school board. But anyway, I'm going to propose raising this amount of money. So I propose an amendment that it's clear the sense of the meeting is that 60 grand is simply not enough to do the job once we find the right people to do it. So I would amend the motion to permitting the school board, the select board to spend up to $120,000 for the provision of services of coverage. Police coverage.
Okay, Charlie Hutchinson has proposed an amendment to change the sum in this article to 120,000, or say actually have it be worded up to $120,000. So then the motion would read, shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate the up to the sum of $120,000 for law enforcement coverage, period. Is there a second to that amendment? All kinds of seconds. I'll go with Karen Blanchard right here. Okay. Then any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, which would change the motion to read, shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate up to the sum of $120,000 for law enforcement coverage? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. I'm going to say the ayes have it, and the motion, the amendment carries. That means we're on to the main motion, pretty much what I just read. And any further comments, questions about the main motion? Okay, then the main motion is Article 18. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster raise and appropriate this up to the sum of $120,000 for law enforcement coverage? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And the motion, Article 18, passes. Article 19, shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of the July 29, 2021 storm event to be transferred to the general fund with $200,000 to be used to reduce fiscal year 2024 taxes to be raised. What is your pleasure?
Nathan DeGaulle, I move Article 19 as written.
Nathan moves Article 19 as written. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of the July 29, 2021 storm event to be transferred to the general fund with $200,000 to be used to reduce FY 2024 taxes to be raised? Is there a second? Okay. Sarah is seconded. Okay. Any comments, questions? Yes. Why don't we go with Martha Mitchell?
I'm Martha Mitchell. I would like to know why this money isn't left in the highway fund. It's my recollection that Westminster has something like 20 miles of paved road and 70 miles of dirt road. And for those of us who live on gravel roads, we could surely use some more crushed rock. I know a lot of roads last spring were completely impassable, including my own. Why is this being put into the general fund when it was for, I believe the FEMA stuff was for damage that was done to the road system?
It was taken out from the fund to use for that storm, and so we're putting it back to reduce taxes. That's the only reason.
Why doesn't it stay in, instead of reducing taxes, why don't we leave it to improve the dirt roads that are truly a mess at this time of year?
$200,000 wouldn't even begin to cover it. It'd put a dent in it, but it wouldn't begin to cover it.
That's my point. So we would reduce taxes now and then we pay more later.
Okay, let's go to Adrian Major.
Thanks. I have a similar comment and inquiry. It seems to me that this money was appropriated in order to help us with our roads. And my particular question is why not put it in our bridge fund, since you've said that bridges are going to be an expense as we're moving forward, and this seems to be a sensible thing to do with it. So I would, I'm not going to vote against the motion to move it into general funds, but I strongly advise the select board to put those monies in general funds towards bridges or roads.
So the body can move to put that money anywhere they wanted to. That's why it's a separate, we used it to reduce taxes. If you so choose to move it somewhere else, you certainly could do that.
Okay, let's see. I think Mr. Boslin hasn't spoken in a while.
Yeah, hi, Ron Boslin. I was wondering about that contingency fund. So it seems to me, so we have some options. So and I'm not a financial guy to know what the right motion is to do with it, but some version of whether it's bridge or roads or contingency seems smarter to me than reducing taxes in this instance, because we will just pay more later.
Thank you, Mr. Boslin. Why don't we go over to Peggy O'Toole?
Hi, Peggy O'Toole. I'm just wondering, what is the balance of all the surplus balances from the FEMA storm fund? The way it reads, I understand 200,000 of that is to use taxes. What's the remaining portion of that?
Good question. Select board?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I prefer to check on that.
Chip has been queried.
Presently, the fund balance is $232,869.95. We still anticipate anywhere from $150,000 to $225,000 more to come back as reimbursements. So this article says to take all of it. Some of it we haven't even received yet. So the opportunity to fund bridges, roads, and all that can take place because there's more yet to come.
Thank you, Chip. Let's go with Natalie right here.
I'd like to propose an amendment, and so the article would read something like, that the Town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of July 29th, 2021 storm event to be transferred to fix dirt roads or bridges according to the expertise of the Select Board.
Okay, so Natalie's proposed an amendment, and it was seconded by Molly Bannock to essentially change the wording to all funds in the FEMA storm fund, and all surplus funds in the FEMA storm fund, and use those to fix dirt roads or bridges according to the expertise of the Select Board. Did I get that right, Natalie?
I had the date in there, and I said, I didn't say all funds. I think I used the 200,000 figure. I said all funds. Okay.
You said all funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll stick with
But you did say they were related to the storm.
Yeah.
And
related to the storm.
right, and that was seconded by Molly. So, did you get that, Pauline? Absolutely not. Okay.
Hey, Dave?
Yes.
I just want to clarify, if you just turned down the 200, it would go back to the general fund and the select board could use it in the manner that you're asking. It doesn't have to be earmarked. So all we would have to do is just say, no, don't take the 200 and let it go back and stay in general fund.
But would it be used that way?
It would be used by the select board and they would have a choice no matter what.
It would be unrestricted, though, I believe.
Yeah.
Not specific for, I don't know how you would do that.
Okay, I believe that what Craig is saying is that if the original motion were voted, we all voted no on the original motion, then the surplus funds would go into the general fund and it could be used for whatever the select board deemed necessary. But did I get that right, Craig?
That's what I believe so. I guess Chip could correct me, but I believe that's what we're here is if we're asking to take 200 to lower taxes. If you don't, it leaves back in the general fund, and then the new select board, notice I say that, they can spend it more wisely than the last select board did to fix the roads.
A little humble comment from Craig Allen. Okay, but nevertheless, we have an amendment that was proposed, it was seconded, so we need to vote on that, but first we need to make sure we understand what it is. Molly.
She just tried to amend that article.
Right.
So if...
a specific place to go.
I'm sorry, I think I know a little bit about what we're doing here, but I'm not understanding, you're telling me if we amend the motion and that amendment gets passed, that we're going back to the original motion, but the original motion is going to be what the amendment was. So how does that $200,000 go back to the general fund? I don't understand what Craig just said.
Craig was really not speaking to the amendment, he was speaking to an alternative course of action, which right now is hypothetical because we are discussing the amendment.
Craig, don't spur me. We're working on the amendment right now, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry, but
And I'm going to attempt to read the motion as I understand it would be with the amendment.
Thank you.
Shall the voters, this is Article 19, shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of July 29, 2021 to be transferred to the general fund to fix dirt roads or bridges according to the expertise of the select board. That's my understanding of how the article is changed according to amendment. Does that, am I correct, Natalie Crocker?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion on this amendment? Lots of further discussion. Why don't we go with team right down here?
Sorry, Team VLC, I just would, could there be an additional thing that says under the, to include consultation with the highway department? Not that I don't believe the select board has extreme expertise in this area, but I think that we need to make sure that the right things are being done at the right time, and it would just be nice to have that stipulation in there.
In addition to the amendment.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. That
Yes.
would be an amendment to an amendment.
Yeah, you can't.
That would be an amendment to the minutes. Correct. Although I'm going to ask Team and Molly, who made and seconded that motion, whether they would accept a friendly change in the wording to say, according to the expertise of the select board and the highway department.
Am I being asked that question?
Yes.
Yes, that'd be fine.
Would that be all right, Molly? Okay. So that means that then that we'll just change that wording. Okay. I'm going to go over to the left here and go with Mr. Streeter.
Cole Streeter. Are we putting ourselves in a bad place if we have a paved road get washed out? We can't use those funds, sorry. That's for dirt roads and bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter, who lives on a paved road. Okay, why don't we go over, again, over here to Katie Dearmore.
I guess I want to provide a little bit of clarity. So we were talking originally about $200. We then, I mean 200,000. We now have an amendment that's talking about the full surplus, correct?
Correct.
Which we heard is, you know, money is continuing to come in. We have it very specific for dirt roads and bridges. All of that money, only dirt roads and bridges, okay? I think we need to be mindful that we do have a highway department, we do have a select board, and I think if we truly want to have the surplus money from FEMA be under their discretion, all we want to do is basically not say that we want to have any amount of money earmarked for anything, because whatever the surplus is goes into the general and they can do what they want to do with it. So if we're looking to have something very specific in what you're looking to have the money spent for, that certainly could be the motion, but I think we're kind of going in circles at this point. I think that if we have the motion that's on the floor right now withdrawn and we vote down the original motion, then any surplus money that's there is under their discretion, and I can assure you they'd work directly with the highway department to make that happen.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, any further?
I can withdraw my amendment.
Why don't I ask Ian whether the amendment can be withdrawn? Yes. Okay. Parliamentarian says yes, you can withdraw the amendment. If I assume that's okay with the person who seconded. Okay.
Yes.
Molly, would you?
So, I understand what everybody's saying about not really putting it towards one or two things. But I do feel pretty passionate that it ought to go back into the highway funds, wherever that is, just because that was what that money was to begin with. But, you know, I'm only one in the hall, so.
Okay.
I will withdraw my second, but I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think it should go in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you, Molly. So we're going to go back to the main motion, and the amendment having been withdrawn. And the main motion reads, Article 19, shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of July 29, 2021 storm event to be transferred to the general fund with $200,000 to be used to reduce FY 2024 taxes to be raised. Any further thoughts on this Article 19? Let's see, why don't we go to Rachel Cullen?
I just want to make sure I understand, if we vote this down, what's the restriction on this money, if any?
If we vote this down, the surplus goes into the general fund, as I understand it, and there is no restriction. Am I correct, Select Board?
I believe so.
Why don't we, let's see, Charlie, you've had your hand up for a while. Right, Charlie Hutchinson.
Charlie Hutchison. I sympathize with the original motion, but I think it's been superseded by subsequent discussion, so I'd like to call the question.
The question's been called. Is there a second? Yes, second over here from Mr. Crocker. So, all those in favor of calling the question say aye. Aye. All those opposed to calling the question, nay. Oh boy, let's do that over again. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. I'm going to say that 2/3 said aye. So the question's been called. So we go right to a vote of Article 19. Shall the voters of the town of Westminster authorize all surplus balances from the FEMA Storm Fund of the July 29, 2021 storm event to be transferred to the general fund with $200,000 to be used to reduce FY 2024 taxes to be raised? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
The nays appear to have it. Let's say the nays do have it, and the article is turned down. Okay, Article 20, to transact any other business to be brought before the Town of Westminster meeting. Any other business? Yes, back here. Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Sparrow, and with great gratitude to our select board, with everybody who's been so thoughtful. I'm sorry to torture you having to talk about one more thing, but the select board recommended that I bring this to the town meeting for discussion. It's something that ultimately the select board itself will decide, but they wanted to be sure that everybody had a chance to weigh in. I have no idea how you feel about it, but I don't know how many of you know, but there is a movement across Vermont to have different towns, organizations, municipalities come up with what are called declarations of inclusion. Those have different wording, but basically they all say about the same thing. I'm going to read the one that was just passed in February for the town of Jamaica after a lot of back and forth. So this would be a sample, so I'm not saying that Westminster will use the same words. In fact, there's a sort of a template that towns can use. But this is what it sounds like. The town of Jamaica condemns in the strongest terms any effort to spread targeted messages of hate that are designed to induce fear in any member of our community. Hateful speech aimed at any member of our community will not be tolerated. Happily, Jamaica is a diverse and vibrant community. We support all of the members of our community who engage in peaceful demonstrations and constructive dialogue. As a town, we welcome all persons, regardless of race, color, religion, socioeconomic status, national origin, gender identity, age, or disability. We condemn discrimination in all its forms and will strive to ensure all our actions, policies, and operating procedures reflect this commitment. So that's what I'm bringing to our select board. I would love to think that everybody thought it was a no-duh, but maybe it's not. So I don't know how you want to proceed, but that's my...
So is it any motion or vote by this body under this article is non-binding because it was not warned. However, a vote certainly can be taken by the body, and that goes as I assume as a recommendation to the select board, or potentially to the next annual meeting. But it depends on. Would you like to make a motion, or would you just like to make a statement?
I have no idea what I want to do. Whichever you recommend. It really, I will say from my work with other towns, and I am a resident of Westminster West, so this has personal meaning, but I have worked in other towns with this, is that some towns really haggle over this, every single word. Other towns just take it and say, of course. So it's really, I really don't know. I'll make a motion. Should I make a motion? And it's non-binding?
It's non-binding, so the wording can be changed.
Okay, so non-binding motion. So should you want me to put that into words?
Yes.
Okay. How do you know what I think till I hear what I say, right? Yeah, and I put a whole bunch of these back in the back, just so you know, so if people are interested in more details, you can take them home. So I would like to move that the select board take up the question of making a declaration of inclusion.
Okay, Lisa Stroud-Pepin would like to move that the select board take up the question of making a declaration of inclusion. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Pauline, do you have that? Okay, is there a second? Many seconds. Why don't we go with Matt Conklin over here? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and I will just reiterate that that will be a recommendation to the select board, and the select board will be able to discuss it and take action if they wish to, with the guidance from this body. Okay, thank you, Lisa. Any other business to be brought before the town? Yes, Mr. Tony Coven.
There are many reports from different organizations and agencies that do business with the town. I have not been able to find one from Golden Cross Ambulance. I'm curious if the select board has any question about that.
Report from Golden Cross Ambulance. I see Ally raising her hand over there, and unless there's any objection, maybe Ally can speak to them.
I called Golden Cross when we were getting ready to do budgeting to see if they were going to increase their rates. They are not comfortable signing a contract with us because they don't know if they're going to be defunct. So that's why it isn't in the budget. We are going to continue to pay them. That was kind of a agreement that they would not let us down, but they just didn't want to do a contract. COVID really messed with them. Lack of help, lack of volunteers, that kind of thing. Not as lucky as Fire District number 3. But yeah, so that's why it's not in the budget.
Thank you. Okay, I can't see who that is, but out back there. Jim Comptons.
Yeah, speaking to the Golden Cross event, something has to get done by the select board to get somebody else in here. Because recently, probably a week ago, the closest ambulance to us was either Alstead, Keene, or Bradford. That's a problem. Especially during 121 construction, my end of the town, that's 20 minutes or longer for an ambulance to come from Alstead. So I think at this point, like select board, we're looking to get Golden Cross the boot and get somebody else in here that can do the job. Or we take a stipend and we pay all since they live over here, it seems lately, and they're all volunteer. And I would not really actually like to be one of them because those guys go home most weeks probably without a 40-hour paycheck because they spend a lot of time in the ambulances. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other business to be brought before the town?
End this session.
My dad is bugging me to end the meeting. But Molly has her hand up back there. Molly.
A lot of times we agree to disagree, Craig Allen, but thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Craig. And that, I think, will be it. Good to see you all, and
Motion to adjourn?
No, recess.
oh, we are not adjourning. We are going to recess till Tuesday, 10 o'clock, when the ballots, and when we vote at the fire station. And I'm also getting something else from Katrina. I'm good. Great. And we're all good. Okay. Safe home.